Hello, I'm Jeremy Rivera, your unscripted podcast host. I'm here with two fine guests today, Claude Zdanow and Chris Becker. Let's do a tag team introduction for both of you, focusing on what you guys have done that builds trust that you are the expert in your field.
Wow. What a question to start this off with. Well, I'll go first. My name's Claude Zdananow. I'm the CEO of Honor. We are a publicly traded marketing technology and agency network. What that simply means is we own and operate technology-enabled marketing agencies that help middle market and growth stage brands advertise digitally on the internet across performance media, SEO, GEO, email, and a range of other services. And I guess, what have I done to have credibility in this space? I guess I've been in the industry for almost 2 decades. Have run now two different agency groups like this where we've done multiple acquisitions of marketing companies under Honor. As of date, we've now done 4 acquisitions since the inception of the business. And yeah, and we have, team all over the world and are building a fun and interesting business. And I'll hand it over to our president, Mr. Chris Becker.
Hey guys, I'm the president of Honor, and on the president's side, for my role and responsibilities, really sits on the internal facing side of the business. So I oversee and manage all P&Ls that we own, the technologies and the agencies. One thing that my background lends itself to that I look at is um, we have a real focus on what value do we actually provide. What is the meaningful thing to companies? When companies come to us, anytime a business, engages with a piece of technology or an agency, especially an agency, they're looking to make more money than they were charged for, just point blank. And if you look at the agencies that have been managing for the last 5 years with Honor, and then previously with Claude at the holdco that he was with prior, our retention rate is incredible. We have a very low churn rate. So when I look and say, what is the things that we've done to build trust? I think there's no metric that points to that than having lower than a 5% churn rate annual for 5 consecutive years at a performance marketing agency. So with that, I'll say that we've worked with incredible clients. We have some really cool backgrounds, and we've done some cool things. But that may be the actual metric that points to trust for me. That means the most.
Makes sense. And this opens the field to quite a bit because not only are we talking about, you know, uh, digital marketing agencies, but multiple digital marketing agencies. I would imagine that the mix or approach of those agencies would need to be somewhat different from each other. So let's talk a little bit about cross-channel or multi-channel. What is the right mix for small businesses to consider in their marketing strategy online, as well as and then the flip side of that is for SEOs, how do we need to adjust what we've done to better integrate across those multiple disciplines or channels to function better and come out with better outcomes?
Well, let me speak to the first part of that question, and then I think I'll hand it over to Chris to talk a little bit more about the SEO side of things. I think, to be clear around operating multiple agencies and making acquisitions, we're primarily, as of today, focused on two verticals, right? The smallest one being healthcare, right? Working with B2B, in a more of a B2B and some B2C marketing. But on the largest part of our business, and one where we've made all the acquisitions to date, is actually not going horizontal, but actually going deeper into performance digital marketing, specifically for e-commerce brands and anyone looking to kind of drive leads, sell products, sell services on the internet, right? Specifically in walled gardens. So think of Google, Meta, TikTok, retail media, etc. And so when we talk about making acquisitions, we're typically not necessarily buying other agencies that compete with one another, or they're going to be other services. We're buying kind of agencies to build out a more robust level of offering that we currently there is in the same thing we are currently doing, and in some cases add some additional services, but those services are complementary to what we're already doing, right? So it's kind of putting one and one together to equal three or four, right? The idea of kind of we're buying, we have an existing platform, an agency, for example, that was previously called Storia. We bought an agency called Juice, and then we put the two of them together, and they're now called Juice. Juice is our kind of overarching performance marketing brand, right? And we did that because we want kind of that one platform, one center of excellence that can speak to the clients that know us and want to be part of that. And there's pluses from both businesses. And so each time we look at an acquisition or buying another business, it's really around two things. One, how does it make us better at what we do, right? Maybe it's more data, more industries we've worked in, kind of as it relates to e-commerce, for example, and sometimes that could be additional services. And so that's really kind of the focus when we talk about multiple agencies. Think of us as a holding company where we have kind of two existing services or agency verticals that we're buying businesses into. That's not to say that we won't grow out of that in the future and maybe have more verticals, but that's our kind of two core verticals. And I'll leave the one caveat to that is that we do also have on the side, a bit of a venture studio or technology incubator where we're called Honor Labs, where we have made some acquisitions around pieces of technology, marketing technology specifically, that we think all our agencies can benefit from, right? And so we've done some acquisitions there to kind of say, hey, is this cool or interesting technology that we can use that our agencies can be better at what they're doing because we now have that within our wheelhouse. And then Chris, I'll pass you
Yeah,
off to talk about the SEO side of things. And
thanks. Yeah, so just to close, put a bow on what Claude was saying, when we make acquisitions, from one business to another, the platform honor is that through line. And so they're actually not too dissimilar in concepts outside of what they seek to achieve for clients. Now, at the performance side, specifically in the SEO side, cross channel, we're seeing major disruption, frankly. And what I call major disruption is more about rate of change, not necessarily yet that change in high volume has been disrupted. But the rate of change is clearly headed towards LLM usage. There are ways of, or at least hacky ways of tracking how much attention your brand is getting with a particular LLM, and I'm happy to talk about how to do that. And the fruit of doing that kind of allows you to see what channels you really need to be giving attention to, where maybe your weaknesses are. But certainly, you can't deny that Reddit is playing a big role in this. Granted, it's been downgraded here in the recent period of time. Reddit stock dropped because a report or print came out suggesting that Reddit's usage and prompt outputs have been decreasing over time. That was at least what I read, or at least understood what I read to be. And so I'll say that regardless of what that print said, I still don't believe that you can shy away from Reddit or tools similar in that same vein or whatnot. And your personal blog on your website or your personal website, the product description pages, these are areas where those contextualization, you're going to try to align with what you have off site, with what you do have on site, and try to build uniquely. Historically, we had this concept of a pillar cluster strategy that was from your website built out, and you get into these kind of peak key terms that you're trying to rank for. I think now you really have to look at the internet as a web of data in which feed into that more pillar cluster model. And instead of, just keyword optimization and just interlinking, you really have to think about contextualization now broadly and across all platforms. And that may involve feeding as a strategy. That may involve, different types of affiliate engagements than we have seen in the past. And that also may involve pandering to the big guys out there, the Walmarts and the 10,000-pound gorillas that are getting these early relationships with, a chat GPT or Perplexity. Those early relationships are backdoors to those, those algorithms. And sometimes you just have to play the game there. though, we like to see what treats the SMBs the best.
Speaking with my friend Michael McDougall of Right Thing Agency, and we were kind of like saying, the golden age of SEO as Google only, from 2010 to 2020. That's all, if you could figure out backlinks and get your content strategy, you didn't have to worry about Microsoft anymore. Yahoo was gone. And, the only game in town was Google, but that time is over.
It's so gone.
It's so gone. Um, and not just because of GPT, but, if you look at moves within Amazon. Amazon has its own sub search ecosystem. If you are thinking about, commoditization, like getting your product out there, it's as much as getting into these new different sub ecosystems. And not just Google Merchant Center, but you got to have as strong an Amazon optimization game or Amazon mitigation game
Hmm.
um, to compete against it. Either choose to play or play against it. What's your advice? We'll go for SMBs that are running in e-commerce. Considering, what is a good way to consider your marketing mix now that Google is is still a key player, is still super important, but now I think considering the secondary or knock-on impacts of what you do in Google, have other places where they can have more benefit. So it's like I don't want to say that Google is devalued because what you can do or what should have been the best SEO product process in the beginning, of making killer content and distributing, getting it in more places has more value. But how do you structure your marketing team to handle that? How do you address that problems for small businesses?
This is a topic, I'm thankful that you asked the question. This is a topic I think that is in every boardroom, in every small business leadership circle, um, in every CMO's mind right now. There's no ignoring the elephant in the room that things are changing. Like you said, it's no more, and the Google is no longer your only pillar that you have on the search side. Yeah, the answer to your question, I think, starts with a concept and then it lends to tactics. I think the concept is on the data side. You have simply got to look at your data differently now. There's so many zero-click movements. There's so many. Um, we used to look at clicks to your website and think, well, this was informational click and this was a commercial click and so on. And now you only get commercial clicks, point blank. They're coming to your website with high buyer intent. We're seeing a lot of people who are seeing their SEO down, but the revenue slightly up from organic. And so you're seeing these dynamic shifts. And to anyone who's an SEO expert, this is not news. But to any people who are looking at marketing media mix, it is something from a conceptual perspective that you really have to consider. And so I say that you need to really lend your data stack to measuring behavior of your audience and getting very intimate with the cohorts or your avatars, whatever marketing speak we need to use there to know exactly who it is that you're marketing to. Because earlier we were talking about with the contextualization of all of your content, it needs to speak very specifically to someone. We're not just marketing to athletes, we're marketing to amateur runners who enjoy 5Ks and may take on a marathon every year. As an example, we really got to get down to the nitty gritty of who we are marketing this key product to or this set of product category to, and make sure that we're building an entire measurement framework for their behavior, because we're going to see them engaging on platforms, we're going to see them engaging on website, and we're going to see them converting and then reconverting down the funnel. And I think that historically, we used to look at all of these clicks to the website and give credence to that. And now we need to look at how much, what's my share of wallet on the LLM space? Within ChatGPT, relative to my competitors, what percentage of queries do I populate within the answer for relative to my competitors? And, how often does this LLM recommend my product or my service over my competitors? So conceptually, I think it really does start with a reframing of how we look at the data, and then we can start taking action on that data.
I definitely agree. I mean, it's on a granular level too, down to the industry. I was talking with my friend Tim about his precast walls client, and we were looking at, they've got these wall constructions, and I wanted to point out to him that we needed to get down to the comparative level of that type of wall versus another wall, type of wall that they don't do. Um, you know, and to also, provide the answers of that head-to-head question of like, how am I differentiated from this other product? Because if you don't do it on your site and you don't distribute that elsewhere, then when these LLMs are building that knowledge graph about that product, you're not going to be included. So
Simple as that.
I see it though as different from the massive content shotgun top level content mass production system we had in the 2010s to 2020 of like, let's write everything, like let's have an article about how to fix leaks, let's have an article about how to fix faucets, and it was all top of funnel stuff. Now we have LLMs that can mostly do that, but I think the answer is that we need to move down the funnel. Would you agree, Claude, that it's about moving our content marketing strategy further down the funnel in terms of the content spread we're making?
Yeah, I mean, look, I absolutely agree. I think it's, to kind of harp on what Chris was saying, it's about relevancy, right? Based on the queries and based on showing up in a place that like matters, right? I think there used to be a lot of things that you would do just to get eyeballs, right? And then hoping those eyeballs would convert, right? And just being, hey, I want to be I don't know, I run a plumbing company, and I want to be a thought leader in plumbing and post articles about thought leadership of plumbing because you want to rank for certain things. I mean, I'm using an extreme example, right?
Sure.
But then to hopefully convert, right, that end user, where now it's not necessarily the best solution, right? It's like, I want the best, I don't know, shoes for running at 100-degree temperatures in Arizona. It's like, how do you solve for that query, right? How do you have content that speaks to that around your product and ties that all the way back? So yeah, I think you're totally spot on. We're just in this hyper catered world now where the expectation, I think, by nature of these LLMs is instant gratification, instant result that speaks to exactly what your question is, right? And so how do you link those two together is very different than where we once were.
Chris, how do you address the uncanny valley of, that push and pull, and this happens a lot on Reddit, in particular, of you want to market to people on Reddit, but if you try too hard or try in the wrong way, they will eat you alive and downvote your content and upload actively memes to mock and or destroy. I know there's wreckage of dozens of companies that have tried super hard to show up on Reddit, and crashed and burned. What have been some of the, and it's not just Reddit, there is kind of a audience participation, a certain level of acceptance of, the AstroTurf on different platforms. So I think Instagram and TikTok might accept more of an AstroTurf reality, but how do you deal with that side of it when you're proposing, that people in their digital marketing mix start to look outside of just what they can publish with comfortably on their own site, but start to look at, secondary platforms to multiply their message with influencers or themselves directly with their brands?
Yeah, the question of how do you do authenticity at scale? That's a tough one. It's a tough one. There's no way of discussing it without getting into some gray areas, without getting into some trial and error. And then in those gray areas, you can really get egg on your face, like you were talking about. People get taken down on these platforms if you show up as inauthentic, trying to lean too far on that authenticity at scale. You lean too far on the ladder and you focus too much on scale. Um, there, of course, you can reach out to curators and try to get curated content, on behalf of your company, and you can work with those curators in some manner. It honestly is challenging to do that. You can invite customers to leave reviews. Your conversion rates will be low there. But I think what you really can, and what I'm going to do is maybe speak to strategies that people can use. I'm not necessarily speaking to strategies that we use, just to be clear.
Sure.
But what you can do out there, and this is getting into a bit of a box, is if you have audience members who are creating authentic elements on on Reddit or other platforms as well, not just Reddit. We mentioned Quora as another, but they're creating authentic answers or authentic reviews of your product. You can do micro tasks and get those upvoted at a high frequency in a way that doesn't flag the system. You don't get crazy, but just give them some help, if you will, to create that. Now, I know I'm only saying that because I know a lot of brands that do that, and we've ran into it. But we've also seen people overdo it. It's everything in a way that can appear to be true. If you have virtually no presence on Reddit and your first post gets massive upvotes, it probably seems pretty silly, and people are going to look at it because we're human and we know exactly what is real and what isn't. So you can get into some strategy there of jockeying the system, no different than any system out there that gets jockeyed. I know that happens a lot on the social media platforms, kind of micro tasks of people engaging quickly to a post and in a positive manner. And you provide in the micro task a large volume of curated responses that heck AI can now curate in mass volume. And you hand those out and people select those one of one of 50 responses, and they simply copy and paste it in the post response. You see that happening on Reddit. You see that happening elsewhere. I don't know that I necessarily condone it, but I also don't know that I necessarily don't in the moment of you have a great authentic piece of content out there, and now we're just trying to play an algorithmic game to get this syndicated at a greater value. And so there is a piece of that you're trying to jockey and you're trying not to. The most important piece is create a great product and a great service that people want to talk about, and then invite them to talk about it. So we get into these items, and you want to use them cautiously. If you do choose to use them, you have to ask yourself if they're within your value set. But those are tools and mechanisms out there that people are pulling levers. But the most important thing is have a really valuable product and focus in on your value proposition against your pricing structure so that people have a real reason to go and talk.
That makes sense. It kind of echoes back. I went to PubCon, which is a SEO convention in Las Vegas, mostly known for the drinking, thus the PubCon. And we go to this bar. I think it was like a German themed bar, and I sit at the bar, and this SEO guy sits next to me, and he starts talking about his SEO strategies, and I start to realize that it's the equivalent of a Jedi sitting next to a Sith Dark Lord, because he starts telling me about how Google is actually the bad guy. They're gatekeeping, and actually, as a black hat SEO, he's doing Google a favor by pushing the edges, by finding the exploits in the algorithm to bring it to their attention. And if they can't be bothered to fix the algorithm enough for their users, then it's okay. That doesn't matter because it's just terms and conditions. They're not laws, that you have to absolutely obey. You just, if your clients are risk averse, then buy some secondary domains. It's really okay. You're as a black hat SEO, you're benefiting the SEO ecosystem by making millions of dollars pushing pills, porn, and casinos, because Google's never going to improve its algorithm for everybody else unless we push those buttons and make them improve their systems. So obviously that's a pretty So I'm sitting there like, okay, well, yeah, that's okay. That's a very Palpatine argument to make
Yeah.
about
So
white hat, black
that
hat.
gets far on the Machiavellian side of that
It's
stuff.
very on the Machiavellian side, but it does kind of echo across what you said of like, is it, you know, if your job is to promote your client and get their products to be sold, then does it matter if you paid a bot to click an upvote button 50 times? Or
Yeah, I'll
5
say
times
this.
or 500 times. So sometimes maybe it's a question of scale of it versus, it is that question of authenticity when it comes to digital marketing, and these choices. I personally handle it on a matrix of risk that I'm presenting to the client and what's the potential downside of following through on that. In some cases where you're doing, kind of, gray hattish local SEO stuff, then that has high risk, high reward because your local profile gets burned, your company can't show up in those searches.
I also think you said a really important piece there of the bot side of things. Anti-bot, to be honest with you, across all strategy. So I think it's pretty important that if you are going to take a micro task approach and you're going to try to do it in moderation, that you're using people who can get past proof of human, because we're certainly headed in that direction if we're not already there. I think if you truly use a bot to hit upvote 50 times, you're playing with fire. You really are. The digital footprint on the back end of those platforms that can then be attached to your brand, um, can really light you up. It can really get into losing an account, like you said, which can really hang with you. And so, sure, you can create the subdomains. If you're gonna play with that type of fire, your subdomains are even at risk in that category. And maybe that doesn't hit your domain that hard, but sooner or later they're going to create an AI that branches those subdomains to your domain.
I think it comes down to the business and ethics altogether too. I'm sure there are a number of things that you can do ethically or unethically to market or get advantage in business.
Yeah. I mean, look, yeah, the one thing that came to mind too is like, look, at the end of the day, some of the things that a brand can do and cannot do, besides, how far to the dark side or the light side they're approaching, is is also a factor of the amount of money they have to spend, right? And how competitive the market set is, right? And so it's like, that's the other aspect of it, which I think is important to remember. It's like, I mean, there are brands out there that essentially have endless amounts of money to do these things, and there are other ones that have to be scrappier and more creative in terms of how do they penetrate, a market where you're facing an army of ad spend and, people working on these other brands that you're competing with. Right. And so I think, I agree with you. It's, I liked your comment earlier about risk and then thinking about the ethics, but I think also part of it plays into, it's like, where are you investing your dollars for what result, and what is okay with you, and how you're going to do that to try to get the results you need. Right. Because that plays into it as well.
Yeah, and it's also probably like one benefit you could say of Google not being the only playground is that there's literally, there are hype verticals and niches and products and services where a new player coming onto the playground they don't deserve to be on the first page. There are 10 really good, strong competitors who have tons of market influence and they deserve to be on the first page. And you being the newbie, I'm sorry, but you don't. There are cases like that. And so now that Google's not the only playground, that leads to, you know, a more diversified choice. Not to say don't have a website, not to say don't create content, but just consider, how you leverage that, or how you're approaching that. If you're not going to be necessarily the first page on Google for your head term, maybe it's, find another play.
I must say that a strategy that we definitely deploy for our clients to get into where do you put your time and attention, because you've got a lot of with Google not being the only player in the game, you've got a lot to go for here. So I'll say this. The piece of this that we do that I think is really important for companies, it's not, an agency, we do it, yeah, sure, but you can do it on your own, is simply create an agent that comes up, and that you work really hard to give it all the information about a specific persona that you have, and let that agent rather, um, think of every query that would come out of that audience member to your specific LLM. And in theory, if you give it enough time and enough duration, 10,000, 50,000 queries to come out, it should be able to, over time, create the largest list of queries, and then you match that with your query list historically on Google, and you can really get into an AI model creating all of the queries that you need. Give another agent the task of prompting each LLM with those queries, and then give another agent a task of reviewing those answers and determining where they're referencing the answers they give. LLMs always reference where they get those answers. And you can take a look at what type of questions you're not ranking for. You can take a look at what reference points are pulling your competitors and not you. Those are basic tactics. Now, they're not so basic, but they're basic enough that marketers can really deploy and get a grip on what percentage of followership, if you will, or what percentage of LLM usage your brand is getting, share of wallet on that LLM. And it can really give you tactical items of where do you go, what type of content do you create, and on which platforms do you need that energy to come from, so that you can get those references over your competitors, or at least you can get in there and duke it out with them. Like you said, if you're not necessarily that in the brand, focus in on one very specific area and maybe become that on that one cohorted column or cluster, if you will, of queries.
An area I'm curious if you've tapped into, talking to Matt Brooks of Esoteric, of the weakness of many digital marketing strategies who ignore the real world and ignore the value of sponsoring a truck to come out and play a movie at a local park, and having a sign for your company and having a bumper on the beginning of the trailer and exposing your brand that way, or supporting a fun run, or doing a trash park cleanup. Like, there are dozens of IRL things that you can do that they've got word of mouth, and if you're smart about it, they have digital word of mouth, because you got event aggregator sites up the wazoo. You have a literal SERP type that literally is looking for events that people will be exposed to your brand putting on the fall play, putting on that park cleanup, or the shoe drive. Have you had any playgrounds where you've been able to play with mixed media in terms of doing things in real life to impact digital marketing strategy?
Jeremy, you hit nail on the head. This is, I think, earlier we talked about tracking that behavior of your audience and then deploying marketing tactics against them. It's not just SEO. It is everywhere they are. Get niche, get rich. You've got to know those niche audiences that you have and go show up where they are. I'm giving a talk on this in Paso Robles at the Wine Alliance there later this year. And it's going to be about meet people knee to knee. Your brand needs to be meeting people knee to knee. And if you are doing that in great experiential ways, outstanding. You mentioned a couple really great examples. But you really got to have a digital component to it. You really need to make sure that those digital components are leading into a very clear and organized, funnel, if you will, for a beat up turn over time now, but a very clear funnel where people can go get a grip on who and what your product is and who is for. And they can get a grip on that contextualization funnel, because I assure you that if they go into GPT, they may reference that location. And if you have a custom custom squeeze page or landing page built specific to that location, right? We're creating connectivity across all of these platforms. We're creating real unique juice, if you will, to point back to the brand. But we really are. And getting in and meeting need and knee at that brand level with a digital connectivity piece, that hook is, and that speaks very specifically to that audience that we talked about earlier. That is truly the area where I think we're gonna see marketing head toward. Frankly, the metrics have to follow that. Your data, understanding the data, it's really going to have to follow this new attempt to get knee to knee with clients.
I love that. That sums it up perfectly. Um, Thanks so much for your time and the fantastic conversation. I'll make sure that your anything that we've mentioned shows up in this in the site links. I'll make sure even your event listing for where you'll be speaking. Share that in the show notes too. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.